For 8 centuries, the map of the galaxy has contained a wound no one dares to touch. It is not marked by war. Not by fire. Not even by death. It is marked by silence. Every navigation system, from the smallest trader vessel to the largest war dreadnought, shares the same directive: reroute. Avoid. Do not enter human-controlled space. No explanation. No negotiation. Just an absolute command burned into every known star chart. And no one questions it anymore. Because those who did never came back. Stories drift through the void like ghosts. Entire fleets vanishing without distress signals. Empires collapsing after a single expedition too close to the border. Sensors picking up impossible energy spikes before cutting to static. Warnings, always warnings, looping endlessly from abandoned beacons. Turn back. Do not proceed. This is your final warning. No one knows who placed them there. Everyone assumes it was humanity. The humans, who rose too fast. Expanded too aggressively. Then stopped, abruptly, completely, at the height of their power. They drew a line across the stars and never crossed it again. And neither did anyone else. Over time, fear replaced curiosity. Then fear became doctrine. Human space wasn't just avoided, it was erased. Trade routes bent around it. Explorers pretended it didn't exist. Generations grew up believing it was cursed, or haunted, or worse. Because the alternative was harder to accept. That something out there had scared humanity into silence. And if something could do that, what chance did anyone else have? Still, fear has limits. Curiosity does not. In a distant corner of the galaxy, far from the invisible border, a coalition began to form. Not an empire. Not an alliance of war. But of questions. Scientists. Historians. Observers. Species that value truth more than safety. They gathered fragments, old transmissions, distorted sensor logs, relics recovered from the edge of the Forbidden Zone. None of it matched the stories. There were no signs of massive battles. No debris fields large enough to support tales of annihilated fleets. Just absence. Clean. Precise. Deliberate. It didn't look like war. It looked like containment. That single conclusion fractured centuries of belief. If humans weren't destroying everything that entered their space, then why was no one allowed in? And what were they trying to keep contained? The question spread quickly through the coalition, igniting debates that lasted cycles. Some argued it was still a trap. A deception. Others believed the truth had simply been misunderstood, distorted over generations into myth. But one idea refused to fade. There was only one way to know. They would not send a ship. No crew. No risk of provoking whatever waited beyond the border. They would send something smaller. A probe. Silent. Stealthed. Designed to slip past detection and transmit everything it saw in real time. If humanity was as powerful as the stories claimed, the probe would be destroyed instantly. If not, then the truth would finally be revealed. The decision was unanimous. Construction began in secrecy. The most advanced minds in the coalition contributed: engineers, physicists, data architects. Every known form of detection avoidance was integrated. Every redundancy accounted for. This was not just an experiment. It was a question the entire galaxy had been too afraid to ask. When the probe was finally complete, it was launched without ceremony. No announcement. No signal broadcast. Only a single, encrypted channel linking it back to the coalition. Thousands of observers gathered in silence as the feed came online. Stars drifted past the probe's sensors as it approached the boundary, an invisible line that had remained uncrossed for centuries. No alarms triggered. No weapons activated. No response at all. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe the stories were true after all. Maybe the probe simply hadn't been detected yet. Then it reached the edge. The exact coordinates where every recorded expedition had vanished. Where signals had died. Where fear had been born. The probe crossed it. And nothing happened. No flash of light. No distortion. No sign of attack. Just silence. Deeper than before. Heavier. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. But watched. The feed remained stable. Sensors continued transmitting. The probe drifted forward into human space, untouched. And for the first time in 800 years, something had entered the forbidden zone. Without being destroyed. The probe moved deeper. No alarms. No interception. No defensive response. That alone was wrong. Every model the Coalition had built predicted immediate destruction. Humanity's reputation wasn't built on uncertainty, it was built on certainty. On overwhelming, decisive action. But there was nothing. No fleets waiting in the dark. No hidden weapons charging. No territorial signals demanding retreat. Just open space. At first, the observers felt relief. Then confusion. Then something colder. Because the deeper the probe traveled, the more the absence began to feel intentional. Stars burned quietly, but there were fewer of them than expected. Entire regions showed signs of long-term manipulation, stellar output reduced, gravitational balances subtly altered. It wasn't natural. It was controlled. Data streams filled with inconsistencies. Energy readings fluctuated without source. Background radiation patterns didn't match any known region of space. It was as if the laws of physics were being adjusted. The Coalition analysts began cross-referencing everything in real time. Nothing matched. Nothing aligned with known galactic norms. And still, no sign of human presence. No ships. No colonies. No transmissions. Only systems. Vast, silent systems. The first structure appeared without warning. At the edge of a sensor sweep, barely distinguishable from the darkness, something enormous drifted into view. Not a station. Not a ship. Its shape defied classification, rings within rings, layered with segments that moved in slow, synchronized motion. It emitted no signals. But it was active. Energy pulsed through it in steady rhythms, far beyond the scale of anything the Coalition had ever built. Not a weapon. Not a generator. Something else. More structures followed. Some anchored between stars, others suspended in deep voids where nothing should exist. All of them connected, not physically, but through synchronized energy signatures. A network. Not defensive. Not offensive. Functional. The probe adjusted course, slipping between them, mapping as much as it could. Each new data set only deepened the unease. These constructs weren't designed for war. They were designed for maintenance. The realization spread through the observers like a slow, creeping fracture. Maintenance of what? The probe pushed further inward. And that was when the distortions began. At first, they were minor. Slight delays in signal transmission. Microsecond fluctuations that could be dismissed as interference. Then they grew. Distances between stars appeared inconsistent. Objects shifted positions between scans without measurable movement. Timestamps desynchronized across different sensor arrays. One system reported a signal before it was transmitted. Another detected gravitational waves that had no origin. The probe compensated automatically, recalibrating its systems to maintain coherence. But the data kept breaking. Space wasn't just distorted. It was unstable. For the first time since crossing the border, the Coalition issued a command. Hold position. The probe did not comply. Not because it malfunctioned, but because something else was influencing its trajectory. Not control. Not force. Guidance. Its path curved, subtly but unmistakably, drawing it deeper toward a central point. The observers watched in silence as the trajectory recalculated itself again and again, each correction leading to the same destination. The heart of human space. Energy readings spiked as the probe advanced. Not chaotic. Not violent. Structured. Layered signals overlapped in precise intervals, forming patterns too complex to be random. Encryption? Communication? No. Protocols? repeating sequences embedded across every structure the probe had passed. The same patterns scaled across distances that should have made synchronization impossible. Something was coordinating all of it. Monitoring. Adjusting. Containing. The word appeared in multiple analysis threads at once, unprompted. Containment. No one said it aloud. No one needed to. The evidence was building, piece by piece, forming a conclusion none of them were ready to accept. This wasn't a dead zone. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a system. And the further the probe traveled, the more that system reacted, not with hostility, but with precision. Fields shifted to accommodate its passage. Energy flows adjusted. Distortion stabilized just enough to keep its sensors functioning. It wasn't being ignored. It was being allowed. That realization was worse than any weapon. Because it meant humanity knew something had entered, and chose not to stop it. The probe continued, now surrounded by structures so vast they eclipsed entire star systems. Their configurations grew more complex, more concentrated, all pointing toward a single region ahead. A point of convergence. The closer it got, the stronger the readings became. Gravity bent unnaturally. Light stretched. Sensor noise climbed to near-failure thresholds before stabilizing again, as if held in check by an unseen force. Then the probe saw it. At first, it registered as an anomaly, a mass too large, too dense, yet not behaving like any known celestial body. Not a star. Not a planet. Something contained. Encased within layers of those immense structures, centered in the region all paths led to. And beyond it. A familiar signature. Earth. Not at the center of expansion. Not at the head of an empire. But positioned precisely where all systems converged. At the core of the network. At the lock. The data streamed back in silence as the coalition stared at what humanity had built. Not a defense. Not a territory. A cage. The closer the probe moved to Earth, the more the system revealed its purpose. Nothing here was accidental. Every structure, every distortion, every pulse of energy was aligned with exact precision, forming layers upon layers of control. What had seemed chaotic from a distance was, in truth, perfectly ordered. And at the center of it all was not Earth. It was what Earth was holding. The anomaly expanded across every sensor channel as the probe refined its scans. Mass readings fluctuated wildly, refusing to stabilize. Its shape could not be defined. Every attempt to map its boundaries resulted in contradiction. It existed, and yet it didn't, stretching across dimensions the probe could barely perceive. It wasn't contained by walls. It was contained by reality itself. The surrounding structures weren't barriers. They were anchors, locking space, time, and energy into a configuration strong enough to hold something that did not belong in any of them. The Coalition's analysis systems struggled to interpret the data. Entire segments of computation failed under the strain. Models collapsed. Definitions broke. This was not a life form. Not in any sense the galaxy understood. It was older than stars. Older than matter arranged into meaning. Its energy signatures predated known cosmic background patterns, existing outside the framework of everything the Coalition had ever studied. And yet, it was not dormant. It moved. Not physically. Not visibly. But in the subtle distortions rippling across the containment field. Patterns shifted in response to its presence, like reality itself was under pressure. It was pushing. The probe's sensors locked onto a new layer of data, archival fragments embedded within the network itself. Human in origin. Old. Repeated across countless nodes as if meant to survive even system failure. Records. The Coalition isolated and translated them. The first entries were incomplete. Fragmented logs from early human exploration. Confusion. Excitement. Then sudden escalation. Contact. Not communication. Encounter. Entire research fleets lost within moments. Not destroyed, erased from consistent existence. Survivors reported impossible phenomena. Time loops. Spatial fractures. Voices without source. Humanity had not understood what they had found. Until it noticed them. The logs shifted in tone. Panic became coordination. Coordination became strategy. Human fleets didn't advance. They withdrew. Not out of fear, but to create distance. To buy time. More logs followed. Rapid technological leaps compressed into impossibly short timelines. New fields of physics developed out of necessity. Energy systems designed not to generate power, but to stabilize space itself. They were not building weapons. They were building limits. The first containment attempt failed. The records did not describe it in detail. Only the aftermath. Entire regions of space, gone. Not destroyed. Not reduced to debris. Absent. Human casualty estimates climbed into numbers the coalition could barely comprehend. Still, the logs did not record surrender. They recorded adjustment. Iteration. Improvement. Humanity studied the entity as it studied them. Learned its patterns. Mapped its influence. Predicted its movements, not in space, but in possibility. They began constructing the network. One system at a time. Then thousands. Then millions. Every failure feeding into the next design. Every loss refining the next attempt. Expansion stopped. Colonies were abandoned. Resources were redirected. The entire trajectory of human civilization changed, not toward growth, but toward containment. And slowly. It worked. The entity's influence stabilized. Its reach diminished. The distortions weakened under constant pressure from the network surrounding it. Humanity didn't defeat it. They held it. And they never stopped. The logs grew quieter over time. Less urgent. More procedural. Maintenance cycles. Calibration updates. Stability reports. No mention of the galaxy beyond their borders. No calls for help. No warnings sent outward. They sealed themselves in with it. Chose isolation over risk. Chose silence over explanation. Because anything that came too close could be affected, could be noticed, could be used. The final record the probe recovered was not a log. It was a directive. Simple. Repeated across every layer of the system. Maintain containment. At all costs. The data stream trembled as a new fluctuation passed through the network. Small. But not insignificant. Energy levels shifted. Field alignments adjusted. The structures responded instantly, compensating with precision honed over centuries. But something had changed. The probe's presence, insignificant as it was, had introduced a variable. A disruption. For the first time in hundreds of years. The system was reacting to something new. And the entity pushed back. The shift was subtle. But it was real. Across the network, energy flows spiked in perfect synchronization. The structures surrounding the anomaly adjusted their positions by fractions too small to measure directly, yet large enough to register across every sensor channel. For centuries, the system had been stable. Now it wasn't. The probe transmitted everything in real time as the coalition watched the data fracture into urgency. Containment fields intensified, layering over one another in rapid succession. Redundant systems activated, ones that had not been used in generations. This was not routine maintenance. This was correction. At the center, the anomaly responded. Distortions sharpened. Not random. Not chaotic. Directed. Space bent inward, as if something immense was testing the boundaries pressing against it. Time lagged across multiple sensor streams, then snapped back into alignment under forceful stabilization. The entity was aware. Not of the galaxy. Of the disturbance. The probe. A single, insignificant intrusion into a system designed for absolute control, and it was enough. Containment integrity dropped by a fraction. Then another. Each decrease immediately countered by surges of energy from the surrounding network. The structures burned brighter, drawing power from sources the coalition could not trace. Entire stars dimmed slightly as output was redirected. Everything was being sacrificed again, without hesitation. Then, for the first time, something new appeared on the feed. Movement. Not from the anomaly. From beyond it. Human vessels. They did not emerge in fleets of intimidation or displays of force. They appeared in precise formations, already positioned, already aligned with the network's response patterns. They had been waiting. Dormant. Watching. Thousands of ships, each integrated into the system, moved in silence as extensions of the containment itself. They carried no visible weapons. Instead, they projected fields, reinforcing, stabilizing, locking distortions back into place. No warnings were issued. No attempt to identify the intrusion. They acted with immediate purpose. As if this moment had been expected. As if failure had always been a possibility they were prepared to face alone. The coalition fell into silence. Every assumption they had held collapsed under the weight of what they were witnessing. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy out of fear. They had stayed behind. Holding the line. The data streams continued to climb toward critical thresholds. Even with the human response, the system was under strain. The anomaly pressed harder now, its influence expanding against the reinforced boundaries. If the containment failed, there would be no war. No resistance. Only unraveling. The realization spread instantly across every observing world. And with it came the truth they could no longer ignore. This was not humanity's burden. It was everyone's. A transmission was prepared. Not a demand. Not a question. An admission. The coalition encoded their signal and sent it across the same silent channels the probe had used. No encryption barriers blocked it. No defensive systems rejected it. Humanity let it through. The message was simple. Tell us how to help. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, for the first time in 800 years, humanity answered. No voice. No image. Only data. Precise. Direct. Immediate. Instructions. Coordinates. Energy requirements. Synchronization patterns. A blueprint for integration into the containment network. No hesitation. No resentment. No accusation. Just acceptance. Across the galaxy, fleets mobilized. Not for conquest. For support. Ships that had never approached human space now crossed the boundary without resistance. They moved into assigned positions, linking their systems to the vast structure already in place. The network expanded. Not outward in territory, but in strength. Alien technology merged with human design, imperfect at first, then stabilizing as synchronization took hold. Energy flowed from 1,000 civilizations into a single purpose. The anomaly resisted. Then slowed. The distortions weakened under the combined pressure. The fluctuations that had threatened collapse began to settle, forced back into controlled patterns. Stability returned. Not perfect. But enough. The system held. Silence followed. Not the same silence as before. Not empty. Shared. For the first time, the galaxy understood what had been hidden behind that border. Not terror. Responsibility. Humanity had stood alone against something that could not be defeated, only contained. They had accepted isolation, fear, and misunderstanding, because the alternative was unthinkable. And even when the galaxy had unknowingly endangered everything, they did not turn them away. They showed them how to stand with them. The maps would change now. The border would remain, but not as a warning, as a reminder. For 800 years, no species had dared enter human space. Now they knew why. Because beyond that line was not an enemy, but the only thing that had been holding the darkness back.